The following is a production of the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network.
Welcome back to UFHL Now. I'm your host, Kyle Hall, and we have a huge show for you today. The trade deadline is right around the corner. The playoff race is in full effect. There are trades happening left and right. We have Mr. Insider Larry Fisher coming on the show later on with a huge trade board, some trade updates, possibly some news that I'm seeing come across the wire here. But we have some exciting stuff. Let's jump right into it with another huge news this week. We have a change in the standings. Number one, we have a new team ahead. I'm sorry if it's a little tough to read this week, but we wanted to get all 16 teams that are in the playoff picture right now because it is so close. But the Royals are now your new number one team in the UFHL. They jumped the Titans, a lead that we did not think the Titans were going to give back, but a huge week from the Royals pushes them up to that number one spot. Just 7 points separate the Royals and Titans right now. It is going to be a race to the end here, an unbelievable battle. And don't sleep on West Coast Express, just 200 points away as well from the top spot. So, there's all these teams are right neck and neck, but the Royals and Titans look like this is going to be a heavyweight fight to the very end to see who brings home the regular season championship. It is going to be an exciting final couple weeks here, but a lead we didn't think the Titans were going to give back. The Royals, a monster week. Some other changes this week. Kamikaze drops down 2 spots to the 10 spot, which means the Gators moved up 1 spot to number 8, and Red Army moves up a spot to number 9. Other than that, the Grizzlies and Stingrays stay in the top 5. Rock Republic stays there at number 6. Ice Vikings staying strong at number 7. The Royals and Titans, I cannot get over that battle. It's going to be there towards the end of the year. And then you look at the bottom of the standings there. You have the Battlehawks holding on to the 13th spot. West Cam Generals there at 12. Yetis at 11. All lumped together, chasing the Kamikaze there for the 10th spot. All lumped together there. Any of those teams can have a big week and jump right into the top 10 of the standings. And then you have the Outlaw Stallions and Bentley Jacks there, rounding out the top 16. And while we're talking about the 16 teams, let's take a look at now the current playoff scenarios that are right now on the books. We're going to take a look at the Allen Conference, I believe, first here. Yep, so here's the Allen Conference. You can see right now the Grizzlies sitting there as the number 1 seed would face off against the Stallions, who would be the wild card number 2. And then the Red Army would face off against the Cam West Generals. And then you have the Stingrays, the 1 seed, facing off against the first wild card in the Battlehawks, and the Ice Vikings and Yetis matching up. Some very good matchups there. You can see Red Army slowly climb there at the number 2 seed there behind the Grizzlies. And Stingrays and Ice Vikings are neck and neck there. The battle for that number 1 seed in that division going into the Klein Cup playoffs. And now let's take a look at the Legends Conference, the Royals. Now the number 1 seed Royals will take on the second wild card in the expansion Bentley Jacks, who made another flurry of moves this weekend, which we'll go over later on with Larry. But the Bentley Jacks continue to try to improve that team as they sit in that last wild card spot to face the top ranked Royals. West Coast Express and the Gators. That could be a great matchup there. 2 teams that right now are putting up a lot of points weekly. And then the Titans, as we just talked about that, now fall down. Now they're number 2 team overall, so they'll play the first wild card, which is the Outlaws, and then Rock Republic and Kamikaze. Again, 2 teams that, who knows, if Kamikaze gets hot, they can jump back up, but a little fall in the standings this week. Rock Republic holding strong there to number 2 seed in the Klein Cup playoffs as the regular season is quickly coming to an end here, as crazy as that sounds, as we approach the trade deadline. But right at the trade deadline, the playoff season will be here close, so the Klein Cup standings are getting closer and closer as we come to a close here. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that in the next couple of weeks, but we wanted to put that graphic out there for the first time this week as the playoff picture is really taking form right now. Now let's get into the who's hot and who's not this week. We'll start off with the Who's Hot list. And first off, Nathan MacKinnon of the Gators. The Avs forward had a monster week, 30.33 fantasy points in his last 4 games. 4 goals, 4 assists for 8 points this week. The Gators have to love the output from MacKinnon. Obviously, MacKinnon's been injured this year. The Avs, though, are a powerhouse team, and he should be obviously a huge player for them down the stretch run here, but also into the Klein Cup playoffs as well. He'll be a major factor going forward as the Avs will probably go hopefully on a deep playoff run, as the Gators hope they will. Second on the list, we have Patrick Kane of the Bentley Jacks. 29.84 fantasy points in the last 3 games. 1 goal and 9 assists and 10 points. You get 10 points in 3 games, you're going to end up on the Who's Hot list. I think the biggest question for Kane going forward is, do the Blackhawks possibly move him at the deadline? The Blackhawks are clearly in a rebuild mode. They've said that. Kane, although, came out and said that he'd be honored to end his career with the Blackhawks, but a UFA at the end of next season. Could they possibly move Patrick Kane? Be interested to see if Bentley Jacks will be happy about that, where he ends up. I know teams like Colorado and New York are sniffing around him. I personally would love to see him in a Rangers jersey, but we'll see what happens. One of the greatest American hockey players of all time, and obviously can still put up monster points in a week. Third on the list, Anders Lee, the dynasty forward, the Islanders captain. 29.42 fantasy points in his last 4 games. 7 goals and assists for 8 points. Lee overcame a pretty serious injury last season played pretty well for the Islanders this year. Obviously, the Islanders are not having the season they expected or wanted to have. Probably a little too late for the Lee output here, as the Islanders have pretty much fallen out of playoff contention and look to be sellers at the trade deadline. But Dynasty's forward, very good week for him. 7 goals in a week, pretty solid output there. Next on the list, another guy who, obviously his future kind of in question, or what happens with Philip Forsberg, but the West Coast Express forward had a huge week, 4 goals and 4 assists and 8 points, 28.61 fantasy points in the last 4 games. Another guy who has floated around the trade block for quite a bit. We'll see what happens with him going forward, but the Predators, obviously he kind of gets that offense rolling, him and Matt Duchene there. So again, an unbelievable player, unbelievable week for West Coast Express, who, as we've said before, look to keep the momentum going as the playoffs are rapidly approaching, and Forsberg is a huge force in that lineup for them. And for the second week in a row, Roman Yossi, his Forsberg's Nashville Predators teammate and the Nashville Predators captain, 26.66 fantasy points for the Crypto Knights defenseman, 3 goals and 4 assists for 7 points. So he was the top player on our list last week for the Who's Hot list, and he had an even better week this week. So back-to-back weeks for the Crypto Knights star defenseman Roman Yossi. I don't think right now, I think it's Cale Makar's Norris to lose, but Yossi's putting together quite the season and should be at least a top 5, if not top 3 Norris Trophy candidate this year. And our goalie of the week, Jacob Markstrom, 22.70 fantasy points in the last 3 games. I think this is probably Markstrom's 4th or 5th time on this list. The Gators goaltender again had a monster week, 3-0 with a 0.67 goals allowed. Anytime you're 0 point something the goals allowed, you're doing good. With a 974 save percentage, the guy basically didn't let anything up in the net this week. Unbelievable week for the Calgary Flames goaltender, and the Gators, as they, again, as we said, a top competitor, closing in on the playoff time, and a team who's solidly in a playoff spot right now. Jacob Markstrom could be a huge force in the Klein Cup, as the Flames are poised for a deep playoff run with Markstrom between the net, playing extremely well this year. Now for our Who's Not Hot, and I gotta go with my guy Chris Kreider as the first guy this week. I know that I don't show any favoritism at all. If one of my guys is not playing well, I'll put them on this list. That just shows the integrity I have. So negative 0.82 fantasy points for Chris Kreider in the last 3 games. 0 goals, 0 assists, a -6 rating. The Rangers overall had a very tough week. Although they got a win against Dallas this last weekend. It was a highest scoring affair, and Chris Kreider had no input on the game at all. Unfortunately, he was out there for a couple of goals against. But overall, Kreider's having a monster season, as hopefully he can get to that 50-goal plateau and be, I believe, only the 4th Ranger all-time to hit that number. but unfortunately, a rough week for the Godfather star forward. Anytime you have negative week, you got to make the list. Next up, another guy who threw up a negative this week, Ryan Sutter, negative 9.3 fantasy points in just the 2 games he played this week. 0 goals, 0 assists, and a -4 rating for the Yetis defenseman. Again, a guy who I really like, the U.S. defenseman who's played very well over his career, but a very rough week for the Yetis defenseman. And obviously later in his career, you never want to see a guy struggle, but Sutter, he's had an okay season this year. Again, a name who I think came up in some trade talk that I saw earlier. I don't think he'll be moved considering Dallas is still fighting for a playoff spot there. But, for years in Minnesota, I think people probably look back at that Minnesota buyout and question if it was worth it or not. But a rough week for Sutter. But I'm sure the Yetis defense will turn around as the Yetis need him to turn it around as they close out the regular season and into the playoffs. Next up, we have William Carlson, the Vegas Golden Knights center. Probably not the season he expected, but the Gators center. Again, 3.13 fantasy points in the last 4 games, 0 goals, 0 assists, -5 rating. Not a great week for William Carlson. Not a great season overall. The Vegas Golden Knights are struggling. They probably need more output from him, and the Gators would love to see more output for him. And they'd also probably love for him to see the Golden Knights get into the playoffs, which would mean he needed to play better to help their Klein Cup chances coming up here. Next up on the list, Boone Jenner, 0.84 fantasy points in the last three games, and he got injured, unfortunately, for the Ice Vikings. He'll be out until at least next week. So a rough week got even rougher when he did go on the IR. 0 goals, 0 assists, and a -5 rating for the Columbus Blue Jackets captain. The Ice Vikings, obviously, he's had a very good season too. So it's a rough week, and the Ice Vikings who are right now battling for playoff, for their playoff spot and for their seeding. Actually, sorry, they're pretty comfortably in a playoff spot, but battling for seeding. Don't want to see Jenner miss extended time. I saw earlier today that they have him out at least till the 22nd, so hopefully he returns then. But yeah, rough week, made even worse with the injury news there for Boone Jenner. Next up, we have Braden Point, a guy who I think we're all shocked to see on Larry's trade list last week, leading the way of that, the number one possible player to be given away on his big board. But the Strong Island forward, 2.18 fantasy points in the last 4 games, 0 goals, 0 assists, -6 rating. Not good. Does Strong Island move on from him following a tough week like this? Does his trade value get hurt by this? I don't think so. The guy is a monster, unbelievable player, superstar. But a rough week for the Strong Island star. And I'm sure Larry will get into it. I hope his name is still on top of that list, because anytime you see a name like that on top of a big board, it catches some eyeballs. So we'll see if he's still there in Larry's segment coming up, but a rough week for the Strong Island star. And last but not least, John Gibson, the American goaltender, -3.2 fantasy points in his last 3 games. The kamikaze goaltender just did not have it this week. 0-3 with a 5.27 goals allowed and an .831 save percentage. That is rough. A real bad week there for the Ducks goaltender. Obviously, kamikaze, again, fighting for seeding the playoffs. Need to see John Gibson improve on those numbers. He's had a very good bounce back season this year, but that is not going to help anybody at all, and especially the Ducks as they fall further out of playoff contention here as well. But yeah, a rough week for John Gibson, who's having a pretty solid season overall. But I'm sure the kamikazes would love to see him turn around here towards the final weeks of the season to lead into the playoffs and to help with that seeding going forward. Now let's take a look at our Elite Prospects Players of the Week. I think we just talked about a couple of these guys, but Nathan McKinnon of the Gators is your forward of the week with 30.33 fantasy points. Roman Yossi, the Crypto Knights, with 26.66 fantasy points, is your defenseman of the week. And Jacob Markstrom of the Gators at 22.70 is your goalie of the week. So congratulations to those 3. And congratulations to the Gators with 2 players this week, and the Crypto Knights with Roman Yossi there. I believe Yossi's gone back-to-back now. I think he was last week's defenseman of the week as well. So congratulations to those 2 franchises on their Players of the Week, brought to you by Elite Prospects. And now let's bring in Mr. Insider Larry Fisher. We have a lot to unpack this week, Larry. We had trades. We have people getting released. We have a big board. We got a lot going on. We got playoffs coming up. We just talked about the playoff seedings going forward. It is an exciting time of the year. Larry, how are we doing?
Oh, it's busy, Kyle. It's very busy time of the year, very exciting time of the year, like you said. Notice some of the guys that are who's not hot this week: Braden Point, William Carlson, like you said, guys that are out there on the big board. So interesting, like I said, maybe the pressure's getting to them. The fact their names out there in trade rumors, maybe they're starting to slump a little bit or grip the sticks too tight. But to start off, Kyle, we have a potential breaking blockbuster to talk about off the start. Obviously, the insider got contacted right when we were coming on saying, hey, listen, there's something potentially going down today. And by the sounds of it, Kyle, Duckman's Domination, who already had a busy week, we'll talk about all their moves, but they're closing in on a deal for Bo Horvat from the Stallions. Sounds like Jeff Skinner will be going the other way as part of the package, along with a couple top prospects, and Arthur Kaleyev, who's up with Los Angeles, been scoring goals this season. A real sniper, could be one of those 40-50 goal type guys if he reaches his potential, along with Josh Doan, who's obviously Shane Doan's son, coming up in the Arizona Coyotes system. So looks like a package of Skinner, Kaleyev, and Josh Doan are going to fetch Bo Horvat. I believe there could be a 2023 first-round pick also going back to Duckman's, and another roster player believed to be Alex Chason. So it works out to a 3-for-3 swap if it comes together. Again, it's not finalized, it's not official yet, but when you talk about the Duckman's Domination and Stallions, you're talking about Dean Constable, you're talking about Dean Millard and Ian Constable. Combine their names because they work together with the UFWJ country East End in our World Juniors Fantasy League. They're co-owners there. So good to see them coming together and doing business together as rivals here in the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League to potentially pull off a big breaking blockbuster, Bo Horvat to Duckman's for Jeff Skinner and a couple quality prospects back to the Stallions. And obviously the Stallions are in the middle of a playoff race. They're trying to hold off the Godfathers for the final wild card in the Allen Conference, as you showed. And Duckman's is really trying to make next year their year to take a step forward. And obviously landing a guy like Bo Horvat, not that Jeff Skinner's having a bad year. I think they're having a comparable season, but to move out that Jeff Skinner contract and bring in a new leader, a face up front in Bo Horvat, somebody who I believe is a little bit younger than Jeff Skinner as well. A nice move for Duckman's, but obviously for the Stallions to get a sniper like Arthur Kaleyev, he could be the most productive fantasy player in the deal in a year or two.
This is why we keep you around, Larry, for breaking news like that. Yeah, that's a huge deal. That is a big deal. A lot of names in there that we talked about this last week. And Jeff Skinner, I think Dean is probably doing a cartwheel right now, getting rid of that contract. But again, like we said last week, he's been productive, so his trade value has gone up. And Horvat is a very good player there, so some big names getting moved around. But Duckman, like you said, they were busy this week. You would think that they were in playoff contention with some of the moves they're making, getting ready for next year.
Yeah, the buyer's trade deadline, Duckman's Domination. And this move, providing it comes to fruition, Kyle, brings it to 10 trades total this week. And also crossed off a couple more names on my big board last minute. Obviously, Skinner managed to hang on to the big board, as well as Bo Horvat, who was a surprise addition to the big board last week. And sure enough, he's on the move this week. But when you go to Duckman's Domination and you talk about a busy week for Duckman's, for the Bentley Jackson, for the Blizzard, when you talk about 10 trades and there was a handful of waiver claims, those three franchises figured prominently. They were getting their work done early ahead of the trade deadline with multiple moves to discuss. And when you talk about Duckman's as a buyer, despite being in last place among the 32 franchises in the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League, retooling for next season, they stepped up to the plate, potentially landing Bo Horvat, as we said. And their big blockbuster that we were already going to talk about today was solidifying the goaltending by acquiring Darcy Kemper from the Bentley Jacks. So in this trade, the Duckman's Domination gets Darcy Kemper and Danton Heinen in exchange for Scott Wedgwood and Brett Connolly, as well as three quality prospects, Ty Dellandrea, Pierre-Olivier Joseph, and Nikita Chibrikov to the Bentley Jacks. And this is a really interesting trade, Kyle. Obviously, it went down on the weekend. Darcy Kuemper debuts for Duckman's domination with a 46-save shutout as Colorado defeats Calgary in battle of division leaders in the Western Conference. So great debut for Darcy Kuemper with Duckmans. And Danton Heinen also made an immediate impact, scoring in his second game for Duckmans also on the weekend. So great start for that trade for Duckmans. But this isn't about Duckmans making a push this year. This is all about next season and for both franchises. And it really hinges on Darcy Kuemper's future as a pending unrestricted free agent. He's a UFA. Is he going to re-sign with Colorado, or is he going to, go to another potential contender? Obviously there's uncertainty in the crease in Edmonton. He played his junior in Red Deer. Maybe he comes back to Edmonton. Would that be a good spot for him? Or does he end up becoming the next Philip Grubauer, who obviously was an MVP for the Brutes last season when he was in Colorado, and now he's the Brutes' backup goalie now that he took the big contract with Seattle. So does Kuemper chase a contract and end up going to somewhere like Buffalo or even back to Arizona, or does he stay in a really good spot, maybe take a hometown discount type thing to stay in Colorado, or to potentially go to a place like Edmonton that might be a team on the rise or a potential contender? So for both franchises, I think a no-brainer for Duckmans as far as, like I said, shoring up that goaltending position. Duckmans this season had been running with Scott Wedgwood and Jonas Johansson, two sort of journeyman AHL tweener type goaltenders, although Wedgwood's been quite good for Arizona lately, but neither of them are real starter material and don't necessarily project to be starters in the NHL. But now you look to next season, and all of a sudden Duckmans has a crease boasting Darcy Kuemper and likely UPL, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. Looks like he's going to be the goalie of the future in Buffalo, and likely be that tandem next season, Kuemper and Luukkonen. So going from Wedgwood and Johansson to Kuemper and Luukkonen for next season, just another piece to the puzzle. And also Danton Heinen's obviously going to help Duckman's forward depth as well. And then from the Bentley Jacks side, Kyle, they parted with their starting goaltender from a cup contending team. Obviously, Colorado's a favorite to go deep in the NHL. They parted with their starting goaltender, Darcy Kuemper. They're now left with Semyon Varlamov, who may or may not get traded at the deadline. His name's out there. And now, obviously, Scott Wedgwood as their backup. They previously had Mikko Koskinen. They traded him for Semyon Varlamov. And now they've traded Darcy Kuemper for Scott Wedgwood. So quite the goalie shuffle for the Bentley Jacks. But again, they're looking to next season as well. In making this move, they're looking ahead, hoping that they sold high on Darcy Kuemper, getting back 3 quality prospects, obviously hoping Ty Dellandrea and Pierre-Olivier Joseph will be in the NHL next season. They seem to be NHL ready. And then also really high on the upside in Nikita Chibrikov, the Russian forward prospect. And I agree there. I had Chibrikov ranked 14th overall for 2021 for last year's draft. He obviously fell to the second round, and he could be a steal for Winnipeg. He reminds me, his offensive flair is somewhat similar to Nick Ehlers from Winnipeg. So a similar player like that. But 3 really quality prospects in exchange for Kuemper and Heinen. And really, it comes down to what happens with Darcy Kuemper next year. If he's in a good spot, Duckmans probably wins the trade. If he's Philip Grubauer 2.0, Bentley Jacks are probably looking pretty good with 3 quality prospects and including 2 guys in Dellandrea and Joseph that'll likely be on their roster, helping them in the UFHL as early as next season.
Yeah, this is one of those trades you gotta wait and see what happens here. But I was surprised to see that Duckman was the team to get Kuemper. I thought it might be another team in the playoff race, but like you said, they're positioning themselves pretty well now for next year to contend. And Dean has said before that next year is the year they're looking to make a run. So we're starting to see that form more and more, and they made some further trades going out. But Bentley Jack, I mean, a week doesn't go by without these guys making 2 or 3 moves. Let's go over a couple more of their moves they made. They made a big deal of the snipers as well.
Yeah, this one, blockbuster, surprise blockbuster for Nicholas Backstrom, Kyle. And I like to say it's rare that the insider doesn't see one coming, but this is one that took me by surprise. I didn't know Nicholas Backstrom was available from the Snipers, but when you take a look at the Snipers, it makes sense. Jack Eichel has recently come back from LTIR. That's a $10 million cap hit. Carey Price facing shots now in practice. He's getting closer to potentially testing it out after the trade deadline. You need to have that that cap space there. And also going into the offseason, they got Nick Suzuki getting a big raise next season. So just really managing their cap by trading away one of their franchise players and Nicholas Backstrom. Again, I didn't realize, I knew snipers were going to be sellers, but I didn't know they were going to sell from the top end of the roster with a guy like Nicholas Backstrom. And for Bentley Jacks, you freed up some cap space, trading out Kemper and other guys in previous weeks to sort of create that cap room. And obviously they made a waiver move that was somewhat surprising, somewhat controversial as well this week. We'll get to that. But all those moves combined open up a spot for Nicholas Backstrom. And when you look at Bentley Jacks, Dean, they're now rocking a $30 million top line. Sorry, Kyle. And I got Dean's name stuck in my head today. He's the man of the hour, Dean Millard. But talking to Kyle Hall, obviously. But Bentley Jacks rocking that $30 million top line. They got Patrick Kane, who you talked about a potential trade chip in the NHL. It got one more year left at $10.5 million. Nikita Kucherov at $9.5 million, and now Nicholas Backstrom at $9.2 million. Some would say it's hard to win with $30 million in three players in an $82.5 million cap world, but quite the top line for an expansion franchise. You look at Seattle's top line compared to the Bentley Jacks top line as far as the comparable expansion franchises, having Nicholas Backstrom centering Patrick Kane and Nikita Kucherov. It doesn't get much better than that for wheeling and dealing your way to a top line for an expansion franchise. So Bentley Jacks, like you said, always busy. 4 more moves this week, and as Brennan Kopp continues to make his case for GM of the year in the UFHL by wheeling and dealing.
I think Seattle should have hired him over Francis. Tell you that much. They're in a lot better shape than Seattle. As that line is a potent top line. Let me tell you. Again, Bentley Jacks make a trade with the Blizzard as well. And my guy Brendan Smith is on the move for like the 7th time this year. We joked about it on Telegram. Let the man unpack his bags for a second. He's on the move again. And a couple names here, Pavel Zaca as well, who we could see moved in the NHL this next week as well. But Bentley Jack and Blizzard make another big trade here as well.
Yeah, and from that last one, Kyle, I forgot to say too, Snipers, getting 3 forwards essentially back for 1 on their NHL roster, getting JG Pajot, getting Michael Raffle, and a younger guy like Jack Roslovic, who still has some upside in Columbus. They got a decent return for Nicholas Backstrom, considering they were maybe looking at it more as managing the cap. They still got back some 3 quality players that'll help their forward depth. And then, like I said, Bentley Jacks don't stop there. They bid a quick farewell to a trio of recent acquisitions. And you mentioned suitcases. We have a few of them in the UFHL. There was some chatter about that. Who's been traded the most in 3 seasons in the UFHL? I believe somebody's been traded 7 times already. So it's been a revolving door for some of these players. And Brendan Smith is starting to work his way up that list as to the guy that bounces around the UFHL the most. He used to have a bad contract, Brendan Smith. Now he's at a league minimum guy who hits a lot of categories, penalty minutes. So I think in some sense, his contract is an asset now and makes him more desirable in the league. Before, when he was getting traded, it was more as a cap dump when he had that bigger contract with the Rangers. But now that he's got the league minimum or close to contract, he's a sort of a nice throw-in a lot of these trades. Pavel Zaca, a bit of a surprise. They had just moved Isaac Lundestrom in order to acquire Pavel Zaca from Strong Island, the Bentley Jacks did, and a quick turnaround for him. And he's actually had a productive couple weeks with the Bentley Jacks. So I was a bit surprised they traded him, getting back Jordan Martinick, who's obviously playoff bound. So maybe you're looking at it as New Jersey's going to miss the playoffs, Carolina's going to make the playoffs. You add another player to your playoff roster that obviously if the Bentley Jacks pull an upset, then Jordan Martinick would bring more profit back to the Bentley Jacks. Or if he's picked up in ensuing rounds, if Carolina gets out of the first round and the Bentley Jacks did get eliminated, the team that knocked them out, if it's the Royals, their current opponent, the Royals would have the option to take Jordan Martinick on into the second round with them. So potential leasing revenue back to the Bentley Jacks that way with a very innovative playoff system. But one thing here too, the Bentley Jacks managed to reacquire their 2023 first round pick. They now have 3 first round picks in 2023. So that's the Connor Bedard draft. We all know Brennan Kopp made the big, bold move in the scout-to-scout sale to acquire Connor Bedard's rights. So the Bentley Jacks trying to position themselves as a means to either get into that top 5 bidding war for first overall for the right to select Connor Bedard, or accumulate enough picks that they can trade their way up come draft day. So 2023 draft's a big target for the Bentley Jacks, and certainly I think getting a first round pick back in exchange for Pavel Zaca is really good value there. But the Blizzard, another franchise, Kyle, that just continue to put pieces in place for next season, much like Duckman's. A handful of moves this week. We'll get to a few more of them, but Pavel Zaca, probably the biggest name among the newcomers. Again, hoping to have found a home with the Blizzard now for the foreseeable future, because he is still a younger guy, under 25, who was a top 10 NHL draft pick. So you look at Pavel Zaca with the Blizzard as one of their guys. They already have Jesper Bratt, so now they have a couple Devils to sort of build around, and they're trying to take some steps forward for next season as somewhat of a buyer at this deadline as well, as far as targeting specific players in that under 25 age group to help them take a step forward next season.
Now, we had there's some waiver wire action that happened this last week. Josh Bailey, one of the names there, who actually got later dealt after being picked up with the waiver wire. But let's talk about some of the waiver wire pickups and some controversy revolving around that.
Yeah, the waiver wire had been quiet for a few weeks, but it picked up, and then the name at the top jumps out, Josh Bailey. 2 years remaining at $5 million. Obviously, Brennan Kopp, we know he works the phones. He had shopped him around the UFHL. His name had been on the big board last week and had been on the trade block for some time. Apparently, no takers for Josh Bailey, so he really wanted Nicholas Backstrom. He wanted to free up that cap space to close that deal when it presented itself. And the way to do that was to put Josh Bailey on waivers, hope he gets claimed, and there's $5 million in cap space for the Bentley Jacks. And the Blizzard, in their situation with $16 or $20 million in cap space, a no-brainer to claim Josh Bailey, as well as turn around and claim Nikita Zaitsev on the same day. Got both those guys for a combined 85 USD worth of score coins. So pretty good bargains there. Nikita Zaitsev also $4.5 million for 2 more seasons. So essentially $10 million at that time in cap space would have been going to the Blizzard. Like I said, they did flip Josh Bailey. We'll get to that in a second. But still, they managed to, they had the cap space. Why not utilize it if some big contracts are coming across the waiver wire and you got the room? Obviously, they hope that Nikita Zaitsev will be able to be productive enough to kind of offset that $4.5 million cap hit going forward. But they needed some top 4 guys on their defense, and he's still that in the NHL. And ironically, Nikita Zaitsev was waived by the Canwest Generals, and they turned around and claimed Caleb Jones, a much cheaper option, only $850K. So they save almost $4 million in waiving Nikita Zaitsev, seeing him get claimed by the Blizzard, and then turn around and claim Caleb Jones from the Stingrays. That was a bidding war, Kyle. The biggest bidding war of the 5 names on the waiver claims this week was Caleb Jones. Canwest Generals had to go all the way up to 180 USD worth of score coin to land Caleb Jones, and he rewarded him. He had a 2-goal game, had a nice snipe off a setup from brother Seth Jones. So he's loving life in Chicago with his brother Seth, and a great start to his Generals career in the UFHL. The other 2 more so minor. Sam Lafferty claimed from the Warriors to the Battlehawks. We'll talk a little bit more about that one in a bit. There was sort of a connecting move there as well. And then Brian Elliott, to be determined, Kyle. He's on waivers today, but the Godfathers do have a bid in. They're the leading bidder, so he'll be leaving Dynasty. And Dynasty had to make room. Aiden Hill came back on the weekend, had a shutout in his return for Dynasty. And they already have Aiden Hill, and I'm trying to put a name here in my head as to who their other goaltender is. Dustin Tokarski. So they're running with Aiden Hill and Dustin Tokarski. Had to decide between Brian Elliott or Dustin Tokarski as to who would hit the waiver wire. They waived Brian Elliott. For the Godfathers, still in the playoff race. Brian Elliott obviously on Tampa. He might get some more action down the stretch if they rest Vasilevsky a bit. So yeah, interesting there that Godfathers might be adding Brian Elliott via the waiver wire, but certainly no shortage of moves on the waiver wire, Kyle. And then Josh Bailey, as you mentioned, no sooner did he get claimed off waivers by the Blizzard than was he flipped to a rival bidder via trade. Strong Island was in the bidding for Josh Bailey. They actually bowed out at $50 USD. All the waiver claims start at $25 USD with $5 increments worth of score coin. And Josh Bailey was on the waiver wire. Strong Island was in the bidding up to $50. The Brutes actually were the runner-up at 55 USD, and the Blizzard won that auction at 60 USD. But within 24 hours, within 12 hours, Strong Island management, Terry Weber and Rich Phillips had reached out to Jessica Stuckey and Dylan Wheaton with the Blizzard and said, hey, we really wanted Josh Bailey. Can we throw you some score coin and sort of complete this deal, and we'll take him off your hands? And they threw in Ryan Dzingel as well. So the Blizzard basically recouped their investment on Bailey, and instead of Strong Island winning the waiver claim, they acquired him via trade. So that's how that went down. And so the busy week on the waiver wire with Josh Bailey. And the thing with Josh Bailey, Kyle, 6 points. He could have been on your Who's Hot list, to be honest. 6 points.
I know. When I was looking at it.
He was a runner-up, or he was on the short list?
Yeah, he was one of the guys on the list. Yeah, he was on my list of possible people.
Yeah, so what a week for him. He lands on waivers from the Bentley Jacks. Obviously, he got the message. He didn't like that. Comes out, plays one game for the Blizzard that night, gets a goal and an assist, and then gets traded the next morning to Strong Island. And he scores 2 goals the next game and has 2 assists the next game. So big week for Josh Bailey from the Islanders, and now for Strong Island with 6 points, including 3 goals in 3 games, 2 points in each game since landing on waivers in the UFHL, and certainly seems to be benefiting from a change of scenery from the Bentley Jacks. But like I said, Bentley Jacks, they went from Josh Bailey to Nicholas Backstrom with that cap space. So I think they're pretty happy going forward as well.
Yeah, I'm sure they're not losing any sleep about Josh Bailey scoring any goals with that deal they made. But really quick, let's take a look at some of the other trades that went down this week. Blizzard and Stingrays made a move as well. 2 teams that are positioning themselves now for the playoff run.
Yeah, the Blizzard again here, 3 trades in a row that they made, again, just really tweaking their position for next season. But the Stingrays, they identified Kelly Yarncroc as a target from the Blizzard. They feel they bought low on Kelly Yarncroc. They believe he's going to get traded to a playoff team at the NHL deadline ahead of next Monday from Seattle. Potentially to Calgary is what they're hoping, or what they could see. The scenario they could see playing out is Kelly Yarncroc getting traded to Calgary. Obviously, that would be a nice change of scenery for Kelly Yarncroc, and probably a boost for the Stingrays, considering they didn't have to give up much to get him. So yeah, certainly thinking buy low candidate that'll help them down the stretch and hopefully into playoffs, or perhaps into playoffs if he gets traded to an NHL playoff team this week. So that was the thinking there for the Stingrays. For the Blizzard, obviously, Matthias Emilio Patterson, who actually goes by Emilio now is his name. He's a decent prospect in the AHL. He scored 2 goals on the weekend, including a penalty shot goal for the Stockton Heat, Calgary's farm team. You might remember him, Kyle, Emilio Patterson. He was a Norwegian YouTube sensation. When I think he was 10 years old, he was one of those youngsters doing crazy YouTube goals back in the day. He's all grown up now, came through college, played college in the US, and now putting up some points in the AHL. But that's kind of the key piece going the other way. And then the Blizzard didn't stop there. They also flipped Henrik Bjorkstrom to the Warriors for a 2nd-round pick. And the funny thing with this trade, Kyle, was that the Warriors took a chance on Henrik Bjorkstrom, but in the process, they lost his Chicago line mate Sam Lafferty on waivers, which was kind of funny, right? Because Lafferty claimed by the Battlehawks on waivers. The reason Lafferty went on waivers was to make room for his line mate in the real world. Bjorkstrom and Lafferty are 4th liners for Chicago. The Warriors acquire Henrik Bjorkstrom, and then they actually, in this graphic, it says the Warriors to Blizzard, but it was actually the other way around. It was the Blizzard to the Warriors. The Warriors got Henrik Bjorkstrom. But nonetheless, they bring in Bjorkstrom, and then they waive Sam Lafferty, and they thought they were going to be teammates in the UFHL as well, and then Lafferty gets claimed by the Battlehawks. So that was short-lived, but the Warriors obviously felt that Bjorkstrom going forward offered more upside. Again, the Warriors are rebuilding for next year. They're not a playoff franchise this year. They see Bjorkstrom as an upgrade for their forward depth into the future over Sam Lafferty. So they lost Lafferty on waivers, but they gained Bjorkstrom at the expense of a 2nd-round pick. They obviously felt it was worth a shot to try and use that 2nd-round pick for a guy that can help them next season in Henrik Bjorkstrom, who at one time was a top prospect in Florida and is now kind of his NHL career is sort of on the rocks, but we'll see what he can do next season. And the Blizzards still aren't done, Kyle. The Blizzard have one more for us. Another guy who was actually on that 4th line in Chicago to start the year, Adam Gaudette, now playing in Ottawa. They acquired him from Red Army. So they ship out Henrik Bjorkstrom and they bring in a guy like Adam Gaudette. So sort of a somewhat similar player when you look at it that way. But Gaudette's a guy that's been hit and miss with Ottawa lately. He's had some really good games where you see something there and you think, okay, Adam Gaudette's going to be an NHL player. There's a reason he won the Hobey Baker Award when he was in Vancouver's system and then bounced to Chicago and now on to Ottawa. But maybe the Blizzard, we mentioned Pavel Zaca and guys like Adam Gaudette, they're putting these under 25-year-old pieces in place for next season, trying to build a younger, more effective roster. And obviously they part with a guy like Nate Thompson, as well as that second-round pick they just got from the Warriors. They flipped it here and threw in an additional second-round pick in order to get Adam Gaudette from Red Army. And for Red Army, I mean, you get an extra second-round pick for Adam Gaudette, and you get Nate Thompson, who isn't doing much in Philly, but is another guy that likely gets traded at the NHL deadline. So potentially another piece to the playoff roster for Red Army, somebody that can help them rack up some points down the stretch and hope that Red Army can, obviously they would like to stay in the top 10 in the standings and really secure that second seed in the Gretzky division, but possibly even move up higher. The way the UFHL works for payouts, Kyle, 1 to 32 on a sliding scale, all 32 franchises get a piece of the pie from the regular season prize pool as far as sort of a revenue sharing setup. So you finish 9th, that's better than 10th, you get a higher payout. So everybody's got something to at stake, something to win down the stretch. And like I said, even Duckmans is moving up a little bit there. But certainly this trade, another minor tweak to the forward depth with Red Army getting Nate Thompson, hopefully for an extra body on their playoff roster potentially, and more so for the extra second round pick, I think, in parting with Adam Gaudette, who the Blizzards see as a potential piece for their roster going into next season.
Lots of moves there for the Blizzards. I don't want to see what their phone bill was this week. Probably comparable to Bentley, Jackson, Unusual, and Dean, and Duckman also. That those three teams kept us busy this week. We had one more minor, I think we had one more minor trade or two more minor trades here to talk about. Can West Generals and the Stallions move some picks and some SCO coin there. Anything on that?
Yeah, just that the Stallions gave up their we talked about their 2023 first round pick, likely going in along with Bo Horvat to Duckmans. They also gave up their 2022 first round pick here. That one almost made the big board, that pick, the 2022 first round pick, because I thought Stallions were likely to move it, but I thought they were going to move it for an upgrade because they are in that final playoff spot. I thought they'd bring a body back. Instead, they're bringing back score coin, which is valuable at all times and in all ways, whether it's going towards your entry fee for next season, whether it's going towards investing through the entry auction or potentially package with another pick or prospect and bring in a valuable player. So there's lots of ways you can utilize score coin within the gameplay and within the trades in the UFHL. But for the Can West Generals, another first round pick in 2022, Kyle. And they've been a franchise that we saw last year how effective they were in building through the draft. They really want to do draft and develop, and they have the backing, the investment power to do so. Last year, they had 4 picks in the top 10. They had Owen Power, Mason McTavish, Brant Clark, and Jesper Wallstad. Well, now they're going to have another pick somewhere in the teens with the Stallions, unless the Stallions go on a playoff run and play their way out of the teens, but likely start bidding in the teens. So another quality pick back to Can West Generals. And then the last deal, again, Can West Generals giving up some score coin for another draft pick from Duckman's domination. They also added a second round pick, Kamikaze. So they gave up a second round pick there to the Stallions, and then they recouped it by giving up prospect Max Golod and 2,500 score coin in exchange for Kamikaze's second round pick in 2022. And again, we talk about score coin. Well, Duckmans have 2 picks projected to be lottery picks, bidding in that top 5 for this year's entry auction, and so another 2,500 score coin towards their budget when they get into that bidding war for Shane Wright and some of these other top prospects they may have their eye on in the 2022 entry auction. So they give up a second round pick, and the funny thing there now, Kyle, is both Duckmans and Generals have 6 picks each over the 2 rounds in 2022. Duckmans have 4 first round picks and 2 second round picks, whereas the Generals now have 3 picks in the first round and 3 picks in the second round. And we talked about Generals. They're an aggressive bidder when it comes to auction time. So they got a few more top prospects coming their way as well this coming season. And they're already pushing hard for that top 10, as you've seen from the standings update. So look out for the Generals to be a front runner in the Gretzky division over the next couple seasons.
Now, does this possibly set the market for the cost of a draft pick? Do you see that, Larry? Is what they're giving up now, the 4,000 and 2,500? Is that kind of what you've seen for maybe what the market is for a pick?
It changes, Kyle, honestly, from franchise to franchise, how much they value their picks. And then certainly the score coin price changes every day, every minute. It's fluent. So between now and that entry auction, which is looking like it'll likely be, I believe it's July 10th or July 17th is the weekends we're targeting. The NHL draft this year is actually on a Wednesday, Thursday, a midweek draft. Instead of the normal Friday, Saturday, they're going Wednesday, Thursday, July 7th and 8th. So we'll likely slot in at that same weekend to capitalize on that. But as far as the value goes, a lot of it will depend how Scorecoin changes in value between now and July. And a lot of picks, I think, will change hands after the playoffs, right? The playoffs are going to end in June. There's going to be a couple of weeks there, just like the NHL, where, now we get to the trade deadline next Monday. And then there's obviously the trade freeze throughout the playoffs. But when that trade freeze lifts, you're going to see a flurry of action again leading up to the draft. And that's where I think you'll see picks. Certainly, if somebody wants into the lottery and somebody's willing to give one up, you might pay a lot more than that 4,000 score coin at that time once you know that pick is secure in that place. Once we do a UFHL draft lottery, same system as the NHL here in the coming weeks as well. After there's 7 weeks remaining in the regular season in the NHL. So once the NHL regular season's over, the NHL does their draft lottery. We'll do our UFHL draft lottery that same night. And that will really sort of solidify the draft order and really start to put a real solid price on what franchises are willing to pay to move up, move down, move in, move out of that draft order. But certainly those are, if Scorecoin goes up by, 10 cents, 20 cents, whatever it is, between now and July, if Scorecoin goes on a run, that's going to be valuable currency because it'll be worth a lot more come July than it is today. So interesting moves. But again, CanWest Generals are investing through the draft and they're willing to pay Scorecoin to acquire those picks in order to have a chance at some of these top prospects again in 2022.
If I were teams, I'd watch out for Dean there with those 6 picks. If you watch his Tracking the Draft show, you know this guy is on the ball with every draft pick coming up. So if he's got 6 picks, he's got his eyes on 6 guys that he knows. So it's a warning to the league. Watch his show. Make sure you get all the ins and outs. He does a great job with Tracking the Draft. And I'd be very nervous if I see him get a couple more draft picks here at the trade deadline because he's got his eyes on guys. So a little warning to anyone listening right now. Keep an eye on Duckman in this upcoming draft.
Yeah, and he's got Craig Button as his right-hand man, not only on tracking the draft, but he's also...
Not a bad guy. Not a bad guy to have on your side.
He's the president of high-level scouting within the UFHL, their scouting agency. Craig Button heads it up, and he's also sort of an assistant GM, director of scouting for Duckman's domination. So Craig is very involved with that Duckman's franchise. He's enjoying the UFHL, and you're right, Kyle. They're well positioned to. Dean said that next year is their year, and they're going to have some prospects coming out of this draft, including high level scouting has Shane Wright in their stable. So Duckman's is already secure to be bidding on first overall. They have Shane Wright in the stable. The way that works, Kyle, is they have to be the winning bidder and they have to fully fund their wallet, but 90% of the sale price goes to the scout. So it would go from Dean to Craig, which is or Dean to Trish, who's actually Craig's wife, who actually owns the scouting agency. So they have a bit of an upper hand there when it comes to the Shane Wright bidding war and the sweepstakes. But again, as they've said, there's a walkaway point for everybody. If that bidding gets crazy, they'll gladly take the profit and reinvest it in other ways if somebody else wants Shane Wright that badly. But they're excited about potentially having Shane Wright as their face of the future, face of the franchise going forward for Duckmans.
Okay, 1 week to the trade deadline next week. We'll be talking pretty much, I think, during the trade deadline for the NHL and for the league. So let's talk about the big board. Lots of changes this week, like you talked about. Who's off? Who's on? What are your changes? What's going forward? It feels like every minute a new trade comes in. Tough to keep up with it.
It is, Kyle. And to be honest, I was a little worried. I thought, we put 60 names out there last week and only 2 were coming off the big board with Josh Bailey at number 7 and Darcy Kemper at number 23. But luckily, thanks to the potential blockbuster that we broke off the top of the show, it looks like we're going to add 2 more names, and Bo Horvat and Jeff Skinner are going to come off the board today. But you look at who's off, who's on the big board. Certainly, I took off Mitch Marner and Adam Fox. I think if that deal was going to get done, I think it would have happened by now. We talked about it last week. Stingrays are in such a good position going into the playoffs. Obviously, Marner and Fox are going to be on playoff teams. It probably doesn't make sense unless it was a 6-figure score coin trade. If somebody's offering 100,000 plus score coin, I think that was the only way Stingrays were going to take that offer seriously. And then Alex Radulov, Kyle, he only has 3 goals in 51 games. Dallas is sort of on the playoff bubble, but I don't know how much of a market there's going to be for Alex Radulov unless he heats up this week. And then Casey Cizikas and Chris Tierney, they came off the big board, not because they're not still available, but mainly because I think at this time of the year, franchises are really looking at who is going to be on playoff teams in the NHL. The Islanders, as you mentioned, aren't looking like a playoff team, and certainly Ottawa isn't. When it gets to the trade deadline, players that are on NHL playoff teams have more value in the UFHL because you're going to take them on your playoff run here. So you're essentially buying them or trading for them, acquiring them with the playoffs in mind. So Casey Cizikas normally would be a good playoff acquisition, not necessarily this year, and certainly Chris Tierney, unless he gets healthy and gets traded in the NHL, which Cizikas could too, and then maybe they're back on the board. But guys that went on the board, Tanner Pearson from the Eliminators is a guy I've heard quite a bit on this week. I think there's a good chance he'll get moved, having a good year with Bo Horvat and those guys in Vancouver. They're still pushing for the playoffs, but I think Tanner Pearson's a trade chip. I think Dylan Dubé, also of the Eliminators, another forward. The Eliminators might shake things up because they have a brand new GM. They obviously acquired Alexander Holtz not too long ago, but Tal, the new GM, I think he's eager to make some moves and sort of put his stamp on the roster. So I look at Pearson and Dubé as guys that potentially could be on the move. We already heard about the potential big move with Bo Horvat from the Stallions. I think the Stallions might not be done. I think they're also getting a lot of interest on Kyler Yamamoto. I don't know how eager they are to trade him, but when I look at the name right above him going on to the big board and Dylan Dubé, Ian Constable's a Flames fan. I don't know where Tal's allegiances are, but Luke Seanwise, the owner of the Eliminators, is also a Flames fan, so I don't know how eager they are to give up Dubé, but Luke put Dubé's name out there quite a few times this year, and I think there's going to be some interest because Calgary's obviously a playoff team in the NHL, so I think Dubé has interest, and I wonder if Yamamoto for Dubé, just speculating when you look at those two names back to back, could be a one-for-one, kind of like a real-world swap, similar value guys. Michael Possetta from Red Army, I really think he's a candidate to be on the move. He scored a goal on the weekend, so good to see him back in the good graces. He actually had a shootout attempt as well. He didn't score in the shootout, but they gave him a chance. So maybe Marty St. Louis, good books a little bit more, Michael Possetta, but certainly Red Army's listening on him. Alex Edler is returning from injury. The Royals would like to move him if possible, if they can find a fit. Jake Allen, another guy returning from injury right around the trade deadline. The Outlaws are shopping him. They're set with UC Saros, so they'd like to potentially move on from Jake Allen, knowing that Carey Price isn't far away either. And then Garnett Hathaway, another guy who, he's built for the playoffs. He's going to get a ton of hits in the playoffs. Rock Republic certainly contending for the top 5, well trenched in the top 10 in the UFHL standings. But they're looking again. They put out quite a few names on their trade block. Garnett Hathaway was the top name. Rock Republic have a lot of players on their protected list that are no longer going to be waiver exempt at the start of next season, so they don't want to lose those young guys on waivers. They're going to have to move out bodies at some point. Garnett Hathaway makes sense as a potential trade deadline guy that could make some noise for Washington and pick up some points down the stretch and in the playoffs. And then when I went to miss the cut, well, now we got room for Mike Matheson and Craig Smith, Kyle, because obviously we added Bo Horvat and Jeff Skinner, by the sounds of it, are now off the big board. So it looks like Mike Matheson and Craig Smith can join the big board. Craig Smith, again, a hot hand right now in the UFHL. He had a couple goals for Gators, and he might have been right there with Josh Bailey as a guy that just missed your Who's Hot list. But Mike Matheson, a defenseman who, at times his contract has been, people have bashed his contract, and now his contract's looking pretty good in Pittsburgh. And I think, again, the Eliminators could shake things up. I think there'll be interest in Mike Matheson. Josh Manson's back healthy. He's been picking up points for Rock Republic. I think he's a guy that just missed the cut, as well as guys like Matt Roy, Thomas Tatar, Ryan Donato, and Tyler Benson to sort of rattle off the other guys that just missed the cut, but names to keep an eye on this week as we get closer to next Monday's trade deadline.
A lot of stuff there, Larry. A lot of stuff, a lot of names to keep an eye on. A lot to keep track of. Now you have a couple guys up and down the list as well. You had some movements there as well. You keep on putting Brandon Tanev's name out there. I know it is a long-running joke here about him possibly getting moved. Obviously, now he's on the IR. He could be moved. Also, who knows? Does he actually get moved? What is your feeling on that? Is he a guy who actually gets moved, or do you think he'll just forever be in this trade discussion?
That's like I said, a long-running joke in the UFHL because his name has literally been on the trade block for over a year, going back to before last year's trade deadline. There was Brandon Tanev is available from the Royals, and like I said, he's hurt in Seattle. He's out for the season. He's been hurt since December, but Seattle hasn't put him on LTIR, so his cap hit is still counting on the regular IR for the Royals, and they really want to move his cap hit, ideally for the cap space. If they get a body back that can do what Brandon Tanev was doing for him, great. But I think at this point they're ready to just cut ties and take back futures or a pick or whatever they can get in order to free up that cap space. And certainly there's franchises that aren't going to make the playoffs that are looking at Brandon Tanev thinking if he's fully recovered for next year, which is expected, he could be a pretty valuable addition and perhaps a buy low guy. So I think if Brandon Tanev was ever going to get traded, this could be the week. In the UFHL, I look at Noah Hanafin. I think West Coast Express is so stacked on defense with Aaron Ekblad and Shea Theodore and Noah Dobson. The way he's emerged this season, they have a great young defense. I think Noah Hanafin, although he's having a good year in Calgary, I think he could be the odd man out in West Coast Express for the right deal. Mikko Koskinen, we talked about Bentley Jacks traded him to the Ice Vikings. The Ice Vikings might want to hang on to him. Who knows what's happening with Edmonton's goaltending situation, but I think Mikko Koskinen, pending UFA in the NHL, $4.5 million. Obviously, who knows what's going to happen with him next season in the NHL. But I look at the Ice Vikings, they have Alex Nedeljkovic and they have Kaapo Kähkönen. And if Kaapo Kähkönen starts one more game or plays one more game, makes an appearance this week for the Ice Vikings, he's safe on the protected list, but he'll no longer be waiver exempt for next season. Or if they call him up, he would require waivers to go down. So I think that ideally, long-term, the Ice Vikings see their future as Nedeljkovic and Kähkönen. So Mikko Koskinen's name is certainly out there. In similar situation with the Mystics, they have Linus Ullmark as their starter. They have Jeremy Swayman, the Boston tandem. Jeremy Swayman's still waiver exempt, so he's down on the protected list. But if they can move Braden Holtby, especially if Braden Holtby gets moved to a contender in the NHL, then his trade value goes up this week. And I think the Mystics would like to cash in on that, move him out, and then run with their Boston tandem of Ullmark and Swayman. Tyson Barrie's back for Edmonton, back from injury. Certainly he has been back on the top power play unit. The power play clicked a couple times on the weekend. He looked good out there. So I think his trade value goes up, especially in a league that has a number of owners and GMs that are Oilers fans, Edmonton fans. I think Tyson Barrie becomes attractive from the Gators. I know Ryan Schmelzer's put his name out there, along with the Gators have a big trade block. When you look at the big board, there's half dozen Gators there that are available. When you look at the 5 down, Kyle, you're going to laugh because Bo Horvat was on the 5 down. And the thinking there was he had such a good week. He's been scoring. The Stallions are going strong. I just didn't see a scenario where they would move him because I thought he's hot right now. And even though they put his name out there, I thought it would take a big package, which, Arthur Kaleyev has the potential to be a more productive fantasy player than Bo Horvat. But just for the present and the fact they're going to be in the playoffs, if they can trying to hold off the Godfathers. And again, you look 100-point difference or whatever it is now. Well, the Royals just made up 144 points on the Titans in 11 days. So you're not safe when you're 100 points up like the Stallions. So it was risky to move Bo Horvat, although, like I said, Jeff Skinner's having a good year. But Bo Horvat was going to trend down on my list just because I thought it was going to be harder to part with Bo Horvat for the Stallions, but they managed to pull the trigger. I never like to move somebody down from the Bentley Jacks, but Mikael Granlund, as well as Duckman's Jakob Siffelberg, I kind of moved them down from the top 10 into that second tier. I think there's interest in those guys. I just don't know where those franchises are on moving them. And similar with Adam Lowry, we talked about the playoff situation. Winnipeg Jets are looking like they're fading from the playoff situation in the NHL. So Adam Lowry has a lot more value on the trade block if Winnipeg's a playoff team as opposed to a non-playoff team. So I look at Lowry's stock going down just slightly. I think there's still interest in him. Adam Pelech, similar Islanders defenseman. They're not going to make the playoffs, but he's a guy that I think could get moved in the offseason if the Stallions wanted. And last but not least, Oliver Shillington of the Crypto Knights. General manager Dan Nadeau reached out to me kind of saying, why is Shillington on the big board? And it's because Dan had previously reached out saying, everybody's giving me bad offers for Shillington. So I said, well, I'll put him on the big board and we can pump him up a bit. Maybe somebody else will see it and they'll give you a better offer. But as of now, no offers that would make Charisse Scholz, who's a big time Calgary Flames fan, the owner of the Crypto Knights, she'd have to give the green light for Dan Nadeau, her general manager, to trade either of her Flames, Oliver Shillington or Andrew Mangiapane. And so far, the offers haven't been close on Oliver Shillington. So it looks like he'll stay with the Crypto Knights going forward.
That's the danger of this, Larry. You're pissing off owners now and GMs, but putting their players on the big board list here. But I guess before we let you go, some insider advice this week going forward for some of these teams as the regular season and trade deadline rapidly approach now.
Yeah, the one thing we always talk about, or has been a hot button topic in the UFHL, and it's going to be on the owners meeting come the off season, is LTIR and being able to utilize it in the UFHL, right? Because a guy like Brandon Tanev, some of these other players that are out long term, out with season-ending injuries in the NHL team doesn't need the cap space, so they don't use LTIR. And therefore, the way it works in the UFHL is they have to be on LTIR in the NHL in order to put them on LTIR in the UFHL. And so there's some teams that are handicapped by NHL teams not using LTIR when the player's obviously going to be out for more than the 24 days. But where this becomes a risk, Kyle, from the start of the season to now, not so much. But after that trade deadline, when you can't trade a body out, if you're over, like, because LTIR gives you cap relief above the ceiling, right? So if you're going above that ceiling after the trade deadline and that player makes a surprising return in the NHL before the end of the regular season, well, you're all of a sudden over the cap. That means you're forfeiting all your points, or you have to waive, if you're $5 million over the cap and then you have to waive a $5 million player to get under, you're going to lose a good player on waivers. So it's just a heads up to be careful with LTIR. If you're using it beyond the trade deadline and you're going to test the limits and use that relief above the cap ceiling, make sure that you have you have a backup plan and just make sure that the players that you're putting on LTIR are definitely out through the end of the regular season, because if they did come back at any point in April, you're going to be you're no longer cap compliant. You're going to be in a bad situation losing a player on waivers. I look at Gators as an example, Kyle, with Alec Martinez. They're showing right now that they have $6.8 million in cap space, but that's because Alec Martinez is providing $5.25 million in cap relief. So in reality, they only have $1.5 million in cap space. But because Alec Martinez is still on LTIR, they could go out and they could acquire a $5 million player, a $6 million player at the deadline. They could have went out and traded for Bo Horvat. But then if Alec Martinez returns before the playoffs, then they're stuck $5 million over the cap, and then you're stuck waiving a guy like William Carlson or something just to get back to accumulating fantasy points and staying in the race, because can't obviously accumulate points if you have an illegal roster if you're over the cap. So certainly that's something that the LTIR risks beyond the trade deadline. Make sure your player's out for the rest of the season if you're using LTIR, and if not, make sure you're not over that cap relief above the cap ceiling, because that could come back to bite you for sure.
Yeah, very good advice there. Yeah, it would suck to sit there the last week of the year and have a guy come back and now you don't know what to do and you're over the cap space and you're in a tough spot there after the trade deadline. But and also one more note before you go, the mid-season prospect ratings also coming out soon. The CHL prospect game is coming up, one of the most important games for draft analysts coming forward. We'll see the top players of tomorrow playing out there. Tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, it's a big showcase event for the Canadian Hockey League. The WHL, OHL, and QMJHL put all their best prospects together. And NHL Central Scouting, Kyle, typically, and maybe they'll switch things up on us this year, but typically they put out their mid-season rankings, or they put out an updated rankings on the Monday before the CHL Top Prospects game. And I think the reason they do that is the same reason we want to do ours on the Tuesday. We don't want to go head-to-head with the NHL trade deadline on Monday, so we're going to publish ours on Tuesday. But the reason we do that is to avoid that recency bias of, somebody had a good prospects game, let's bump them up 10 spots in our rankings or whatever. We can take the top prospects game, take the U18 Worlds, take the Memorial Cup, take the Frozen Four, take all those showcases to come and put them towards our final rankings, as well as if they potentially have an NHL draft combine, that would go towards the final rankings as far as what you're evaluating. And then, of course, all their league playoffs as well. But we like to cut it off this is still coming from our preliminary rankings before the World Juniors. So we have a lot of 20, 30 game sample size from their domestic leagues to evaluate and to sort of put together these mid-season rankings. And we did have 6 submissions from scouts or agencies within the UFHL. So shout out to High Level Scouting, obviously Craig Button, the Craig's List, which is a great scouting resource. If you're not following that one, Craig scouts uniquely. He doesn't go by the consensus. He really does use his own opinion, and there's a lot of variance from him to the average list, which is great to see. Sportsnet, Sam Costantino, who's obviously also a scout with the Salu Scouting with Peter Lubardius in the UFHL. Sam has his most recent top 32 on Sportsnet, so we'll factor that in. Fanalytica, Ed Palumbo's the president of Fanalytica. He submitted his, we're doing top 64 because that's how many spots are in the UFHL entry auction, 2 rounds. So everybody submits their top 64. Wild West Scouting, Nick Utley, it's his first time contributing to the mid-season scout rankings, as well as In the Trenches Management, which is Gabe Foley, Marcus Borkowski, and Aaron Jones, Alex LeBlanc. So those 3 or 4 put their heads together and came up with their mid-season rankings, as well as my own. I went 4 rounds. I did the top 128. So really excited to get those out and updated, since we haven't done an updates dating back to December. So it'll be nice to update our rankings and see how all these prospects have progressed from the start of the season till now. And it's important for the UFHL franchises, Kyle, because when these rankings come out, they also attach or also determine the projected minimum bid for the algorithm with the entry auction. So based on how our scouts, the consolidated or consensus UFFS rankings, kind of give the franchises an idea of what to budget for each spot in the draft as far as where that bidding will start, what the minimum bid will be. So exciting to get those midseason rankings. That'll be along with tracking the trade deadline and continuing to monitor the big board and see if the big names like Braden Point and Alex Pietrangelo and guys like Jeff Carter, I think, is out there, Phil Kessel, see if some of those big names, Matt Duchesne, get moved this week. We're also going to be a busy week for hockey in general, compiling these draft rankings and averaging them out to get the UFFS consensus. So a very exciting, very busy time of the year for hockey in the UFHL. And then beyond that, Kyle, after the trade deadline, we're going to start planning our mid-season meetings as well for the owners. So that'll be coming up likely the first or second weekend in April. So lots on the horizon. But for now, the franchises certainly have their focus set to next Monday's trade deadline and trying to improve their roster either for the playoff run or retool for next season.
The hardest working man in fantasy hockey. Thank you so much, Larry. Thank you for coming on. As always, excellent stuff, excellent information. Breaking news. He's tracking the draft. He's tracking the trade deadline. The man doesn't sleep, I tell you. Thanks so much, Larry, for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. And let's hope I'm not wrong on that Bo Horvat trade. Like I said, it's not official. It's not done until it's done. But when it's Dean and Ian negotiating that trade, I think that if they both said that it's in the works, I'm pretty confident that's getting done. So look for Bo Horvat to be a member of Duckman's Domination by the end of the night.
We'll be looking for the official trade call there. Larry, thanks as always, and we'll see you next week.
Sounds good, Kyle.
Larry's the best. Great work there. I mean, a very busy week. It was an awesome week this week. I can only imagine how many updates and trades we have to bring you guys next week as the trade deadline comes to a close and the final couple weeks here of the regular season get kicked off and the trade deadline. The playoff picture takes more form, and we'll continue to update you with that. But before we go today, let's bring you the Twitter poll of the week. This week, again, we talk about the trade deadline coming up. Who is most likely to get traded in the UFHL ahead of next Monday's trade deadline? Is it number 1 on the big board, Braden Point? Does he get moved? Alex Pietrangelo, who Larry has talked about possibly being moved. Phil Kessel, who just had a baby. I don't know if you saw the story from Phil Kessel. The Arizona Coyotes fly him out to a game. He has his Ironman streak still active. He plays one shift, gets back on a private jet, goes back to Arizona for the birth of his child. Awesome stuff there. Then jumps back on a PJ, and I think it was in Toronto the next night to play there. So awesome stuff there from Phil Kessel and the Coyotes helping him maneuver that. But I gotta think Phil might be moved not only in the UFHL but also in the NHL as well this week. And a long running joke, Brandon Tanev, as Larry said, it seems like this is the right time to pull a trigger on him. There's someone like Duckman who's really maneuvering for the future, maybe take a a chance on him to take on that salary for the rest of the year. But for the hope of next year having a very solid contributor there on their team going forward. So exciting stuff. Let us know in the weekly poll. It'll be on the UFHL hockey Twitter account. So please let us know who you think, and if there's someone else that you think is going to get moved, leave a comment there as well. Please interact as much as you can with the posts, and I'm sure that the conversation will get rolling there, and a lot of teams will be interested to see on who you think will get taken. But I'm interested to see who gets moved this week. I know Larry will be on his A game. Make sure you follow the UFHL Now, UFHL hockey on Twitter for all up to the minute trade information, everything else. You can find it there at the UFHL. And then also make sure you follow UFF Sports and UFHL Scouting. And then as well as UFFsports.com. If you have any information or an email that you need, please email the UFS Sports email there, info@ufsports.com. And thanks for joining us this week. Should be a very exciting trade deadline. As always, you can follow the show again, like I said, on Twitter for all updates, and we'll see you next week.